Good afternoon.
Hello.
Good evening.
I will mostly be off. I will mostly be off camera for the evening.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Okay. Okay, Ms. Brody, the link is in board docs for YouTube. We have 3 board members on the call. Let me know if you want to wait a little or get started. It's 5:01. Oh, you're on mute, but
I was studied. Okay. 2 more minutes. I want to be respectful of folks' time.
okay.
This hideous light. Oops, no movement.
That's what happens here at the office too. And the moving boxes were blocking the sensor, so it kept going off.
Is oh damn. I had a whole divider in front of the sensor.
Yep, that's what happens. That's what happened to me the last time.
But
Okay. 1, 2, 3. Oh, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 board members on the call. So
okay, so I can start the meeting.
okay.
I'm good to start whenever.
Yes, the link is already streaming in YouTube in board.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. It is December 8th, 2025. I am Shantae Brody, the chair of the board for Hartford Public Schools. And I welcome my colleagues, I welcome staff, and of course, the listening audience. We're going to get our finance committee meeting for December up and going. I am going to turn it over to Dr. Ratley, who is going to lead us first.
Thank you, Chair Brody. I will share my screen for the presentation around the contract that we are bringing forward. I say we because CFO Richard and I are jointly bringing this contract forward just as a prime example of how our time and attention toward stabilizing ourselves financially and financial stewardship goes hand in hand with academic programming and all of the other work that we need to do. And so this is just a prime example to show how those two things go together. For an overview tonight, we will review the contract, show alignment with our strategic plan, share some vendor background, and I'm happy to say Mr. Chris Edmonds is on the call, who is from Timely, that is the organization's name, and who will also share some proven impact from other districts with which they've worked. We'll talk about the value as well as success metrics, expected outcomes, and of course, always leaving the board and the public with consequences of not approving. Just a reminder, as we always offer up our mission, providing all our students with the learning and supports they need to succeed in school and in life, and our vision that all students will graduate prepared to transform the world. The strategic priorities that this effort aligns to includes whole and healthy students as we focus on academic programming, as well as operational and management excellence as we focus on efficiencies in terms of operations and finance. I will add as a sub bullet as well, skilled teams is also a third priority that this falls into, ensuring that we're increasing capacity across our leaders and our educators to better serve our students. I'll now turn it over to CFO Richards to give some background and framing around why we are considering timely at this point. CFO Richards?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. And I echo the excitement that we're talking about the finances and the academic priorities together. So we'll get into more of what Timely is, but it's a tool that helps with high school scheduling. And when we think of our budget, one of our single biggest resources is in the schedule. And it is a really complicated process, all about meeting student needs, teacher needs. And it's gotten even more complicated over time as schools are working with multiple different funding sources that are aligning to their overall priorities, thinking of how we make sure that the way in which we allocate staff is supportive of schools meeting those overall priorities that Dr. Atley just talked about and their school-specific context. And also, as we know, there was the shortened school day this year. So many factors end up impacting how a school goes about creating their schedule. And this is a tool, we'll talk about it more, but really helps make that more strategic, more efficient. And so we're really excited to put this up for consideration, especially as we think about the budget process that is kicking off. One of the biggest things that a school is doing during that process is building their master schedule and thinking about what staff they need, how we align general education staff with other types of staff like multilingual learner support, special education. I'm a nerd about scheduling, like a lot of other things, and it is so complicated. And so this is really a way to think about how do we make those schedules as best as possible for our students and our staff. And so Dr. Atley, I'll turn it to you to talk about kind of from the leader perspective, how this supports.
Yes, as CFO Richard mentioned, building a high school master schedule definitely comes with its complexities. And she's also shared some of our local context that adds to those complexities for our high schools when building out their schedules. Obviously, we want to keep students at the center of all decision making, regardless of our circumstances. And so, but one thing to consider, in addition to what she mentioned, just the plethora of courses, the types of experiences that high school leaders want to provide for students during the school day, whether it's to meet their academic needs, their social emotional needs, whatever it is that they need to do during that day, and putting all of those pieces together in order to produce a strong master schedule is definitely one that is highly complex or requires complex skill. By utilizing this tool, we actually position our leaders to spend less time on the technical aspects of scheduling, because master scheduling requires some tech pieces, yes, but then also some strategic pieces. By removing the technical aspects or minimizing those greatly in terms of all of the rhythms with matching up student desires with courses and teacher credentials with what they can teach and so forth, we actually free up time for leaders to begin to think about how they can strategically meet students' needs given all of the circumstances that they face. And so when we think about those things, identifying and solving for inefficiencies in the high school schedule is one piece. Maximizing the staffing resources. So really taking into account what is the current reality, the funding and the resources that I have at my hands as a school leader, how do I maximize those to get the most impact possible? And then ultimately just creating space to ensure high quality student experiences as aligned to that leader vision. At this point in time, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Edmond, who is from Timely, to share just some information around their work with other districts, as well as more insight into the Timely organization itself. Mr. Edmond?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Radley, and thank you everyone for having me this evening. I'll quickly go over who we are at Timely. So as you can see on the slide, we are a two-part solution that supports both middle school and high school scheduling. So we have our first portion, which is our platform, which is our AI optimized scheduler. And so what this platform is able to do is the first variable that it's solving for is student course requests, which is different than how most schedulers operate. A lot of times schools are rolling over a schedule year to year, or we're creating the master schedule and funneling students into that. In this case, we put students first, and it's really driven by the needs of all students within the schools we support. So that's the first portion of our work. But equally as important is our people. So all of our districts and schools that we partner with are connected to our school success team. And so those folks are working with our schedulers on the ground floor, making decisions, entering constraints, and running different variations to determine what is the best schedule to support the needs of each individual school we work with. And then here's our grounding vision statement here at Timely. We're all former schedulers, principals, and district leaders ourselves, and we have just stumbled into a problem that we see that's nationwide, and that is designing a master schedule that meets the needs of students. And as Ms. Richard said and Dr. Radley, it is a really, really complex task. But when schools truly design a well-optimized schedule, can unlock resources, optimize your staffing, and really align your time and values to what you want to see at the school level. Some of the outcomes that we see, this is from our 2024 customer survey. So this is at the school level for our schedulers who are doing this work every single year. We can average save them 50 to 100 hours in terms of the time they spend designing the schedule. Our optimizer can do that heavy lifting, and they're entering constraints and variables on the front end. And they can even run, like I said, different variations to decide which schedule is going to meet the needs of their students. And then we average 97% core course requests fulfilled. And we can always increase that number by running different variations with each school. And then from more of a district level perspective, some of the outcomes we see by folks using Timely are just the ability to maximize current resources. So that includes optimizing your class sizes to meet the needs of your students and making sure that teacher loads are appropriate across all schools. We also have features within our application which support specialized student groups such as special ed, bilingual, gifted, and talented, as this can be one of the most challenging parts of designing a schedule. And then for schedulers, another tricky part can be common planning, early college, CTE. We have features within our application, and our school success team supports folks to make sure we're prioritizing those features within each school's schedule. And with that, Dr. Radley, I'll pass it over or back over to you.
CFO Richard is going first.
Yes, so I think, and you can hear in kind of that overview, this really is something that hits at both resource efficiency, but also what's best for students and teachers. And so it's kind of that sweet spot of work that we're attempting to do, especially with the new strategic plan. So when it comes to how we will assess impact, one piece is the resource utilization. And so really thinking about how we can anticipate saving money if we're as efficient as possible in the scheduling process. Some of that, and I know some of the work Timely has done before, can even look like just minimizing the number of vacant FTEs or positions that there are by scheduling really strategically and making sure that every student is assigned to a full-time teacher. So there's a lot of efficiencies that can be gained through this process and just using the resources that we do have to get the most out of them possible. So really high return on investment in that category. Also what was mentioned, so there's like the overall efficiency in our resources. Then there's the efficiency of staff time. We saw 50 to 100 hours can be saved. It's often someone who is truly spending most of their time during scheduling season doing this work. And this is a way to both get a better outcome from that process and to save time. And then there's the piece really for students of making sure that they are getting both their course requests and their graduation requirements and anything that they need for their post-secondary planning. So it's really a way, it's essentially an optimizer. So trying to maximize all these different factors so that students are getting exactly what they need to support those requirements and preferences. And then this part I'm maybe most excited about out of anything is thinking about general education teacher staffing alongside special education and multilingual learner. Those are some of our highest need students, and scheduling that can be even more complex. There's such individualized students' needs. You have to think about when they're in their core courses, when they get pulled out for certain supports, if they need to be in separate classrooms. It's just very complicated. And so using this tool to think about holistically all students, especially those with those additional needs, and how to maximize their experience and the experience of those staff, that part makes me really excited. That's always something I've wanted to be able to do more of. So yeah, there's multiple fronts for assessing impact of overall efficiency, time of the folks doing this work, and then the student experience in terms of their course requests and graduation requirements. And then again, the rate at which we're able to really support our highest need students. And Dr. Ratley, I'll turn it back to you.
Absolutely. So when we think about monitoring throughout this process, I just want to add that it's not just monitoring as in monitoring the school, definitely being aware of not only what our school leaders are learning, but also our district leaders are learning, and what we are learning as a full district in this process. So it's monitoring, but it's also learning. And so what we do intend to have is our second annual master scheduling meeting. And so that will be coming up in the new year. We had our first meeting last year, and it included not only principals, but schedulers and counselors who all came together for level setting on any new information regarding coursework, course requirements, and so forth. But most importantly, having a chance to share ideas with one another, particularly when it comes to some of those constraints that were listed or mentioned earlier in the presentation. The training and the regular touch points that Mr. Edmonds mentioned around the school success team will be ongoing with school master schedulers. And this is also an optimum time for district team support and engagement throughout the process as well. Again, so that as schools are implementing and learning and creating more avenues for our students to have their needs met, district team is learning alongside so that we can continue to open those gateways for schools to really get to students whatever it is that they need when we think of academic programming. Finally, consequences of the board not passing this opportunity. We basically risk inefficiently using time or resources and even limiting academic programming availability, primarily due to the underutilization of staff and funding allocations. That's not just at the school level, that's also a through line to district level so that we can make sure that we are again, getting schools what they need, but then leveraging our resources accordingly. I'd also like to say that this is not to say that all across our schools, we're just totally terribly inefficient. This is completely in an effort to continuously improve our processes and just get better at what we're doing, especially in light of changes that were made just last year pertaining to our length of school day, pertaining to our budgetary constraints and so forth. What we know is that kids can't wait. And so we have to get better each year in efforts such as these. In conclusion, this is just a snapshot of the paperwork that was submitted to the board around the objectives, deliverables, the contract amount, the term, and then the departments and the strategy alignment. We'll pause now and turn it back over to you, Board Chair.
Thank you for all of the information that has been provided. There's a question from Ms. Daryl Stoledger.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the presentation. Very informative, lots of information. One question that I have with regards to scheduling, you mentioned, or there was a mention of scheduling with regards to special education services, whether children have to be, in a separate room or in the room or something like that, and hours. Is this program, this system, going to be able to track the number of hours, service hours, as well as, for example, if students are, how many hours students have been serviced, and kind of compare that to how many hours they're supposed to be serviced. So to make sure that they are not missing any hours, by the end of the school year.
Thank you for the question. May I proceed, Board Chair? Okay, well, thank you.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
Didn't want to overstep. Thank you for the question. I will say that our SPED department is tracking those hours that you mentioned. In terms of master scheduling, review of IEPs and ensuring that programmatic decisions are made in alignment with those IEPs is a key element when it comes to the master scheduling. I will turn it over to Mr. Edmonds, who obviously knows about the tool, has worked with other school districts in the tool to see if there are any features of that tool that we might be able to leverage in terms of calculating those hours and so forth, moving beyond just master scheduling and ensuring that those times are included. Mr. Edmonds?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I can clarify that what our tool can do, it's focused on each student's specific schedule. And so we would pull the student data that is tagged to each student. So if they have specialized services they need, whether it's inclusion scheduling, bilingual services, that will come into our platform. And then we will make sure that they're scheduled into the appropriate classes to make sure that they're getting the services that they need. In terms of tracking hours throughout the year, our platform would not do that, but we would make sure that they're properly scheduled to get the services they need per their IEP or per any designation that might be there.
Thank you. And I'm assuming that in the manner that we were tracking hours, we would just track hours and that way and just use this. This would actually just be for the scheduling.
Yes, that's accurate. And the two, while not the same, kind of go hand in hand. So while we definitely want to maintain a log to make sure students' hours are being tracked, by working it into the master schedule, we have evidence that through the courses that they take, the students take, that their hours are being met, or at least their needs as outlined by their IEP.
Thank you for that. Ms. Fortune, you have a question?
Yes, I'm going to pull a Corey here and say I'm going to sound like I'm a lot more against this than I actually am, and that's just not knowing how to not make it sound like I am. Can we, now that said, how do you measure the success of this timely application? Like, what are the measurable goals to say that, okay, yes, it's been better to have this than to not have it? Because it seems like it's such a lofty promise what it could actually achieve that I'm having a hard time imagining how you measure how it's delivering on all of these different aspects of what it claims that they will do. And I'm curious to know, what is the process now for taking into account student interests in terms of the course load in areas where they have discretion as to which classes they can take?
Dr. Radley, did
Dr.
you?
Ratner.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, whomever.
I could begin, Mr. Edmonds and Ms. Richard, and then if you want to fold in for sure. I do think that given again, where CFO Richards started with all of the different areas that were just put in place last year. For instance, how we allocate staff to schools was different last year. The fact that the year is shorter going into this year, some of those circumstances helps us to understand and level set on exactly what is our current condition, for one. When I think about measuring inefficiencies, the big bet is that basically by utilizing a tool such as this, we could definitely gauge the progress in, are we actually utilizing staff to capacity? That's one of those strategic moves that when a school is more concerned with making sure that a student's schedule is complete, which is technical, or making sure that that a teacher's schedule is complete, which is technical, removing those kinds of pieces actually positions the leader to make sure that they could look at the entirety of the schedule and ensure that efficiencies such as the courses that are being offered and the class sizes and all of those pieces are actually working in a way to get the best bang for our buck out in terms of the students and the staff that we have in the building. That's one way of looking at it. I'll turn it over to Mr. Edmonds and Ms. Richard to add anything additional.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Riley. The only thing I would add is from the scheduler's perspective, just shortening the time to create actual teacher and student schedules. In a lot of cases for larger high schools, that can take weeks, if not months. And then when you implement those schedules, there's still gaps that need to be filled, and folks have to go back and start from square one. So by using Timely, we can save weeks off of schedulers' design time, and give them choices in terms of running different, like I said, variations of a schedule to decide which schedule is going to be the most well positioned to support them at the start of a school year.
May I interject, if I may, through you, Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
So this is where I am struggling, because what you've just said seems like it's great, except we're sort of structured the opposite way. We don't have many large high schools. We have 11 high schools. Quite a few of them are smaller. So with 11 separate locations, and how exactly does that work? Because you still need bodies in a given school. Where do you add that efficiency? Is it that, I don't know, you're going to have teachers commute back and forth between two schools, or how are you, like, I guess I needed a little bit more specific, like, how do you optimize and create more efficiencies and free up time? And just, I mean, for the school too, how many people are involved in the scheduling now for each of these schools? How much time really are we saving?
So I will say that it does vary from school to school in terms of how many people are involved in the scheduling. Some schools approach it with a scheduling team. Some schools approach it with one particular master scheduler and everyone else works through that person. In terms of efficiencies, it's actually preparing the schools to work within the resources that they have. So again, it's taken into account, what do I have at my fingertips in terms of people, in terms of allocations? We talked about grant funds, all of those pieces, so that I can create a schedule that does map back to or match what it is that my students need and what I desire for my students in order for them to have a meaningful academic program. Now, if there's the thought about whether or not additional resources are necessary or need to be utilized or somehow garnered, then that's where it's most beneficial for district staff to have a clear understanding. So if there's something particularly where it's the resources absolutely just are not enough to meet some need, that helps to inform us so that we can then partner with you all to make sure that we're getting the resources that are necessary. But when we think about the staff allocation based on the student enrollment, we're really having leaders, which is what they do anyway, make sure that they are working with the resources that they have, but with this tool being able to maximize those resources in the sense of maybe I was copying a schedule from year to year with the thought that I needed to have so many math teachers and so many English teachers, but actually as I work through my student requests, I can actually reduce a math teacher and still get the same amount of work done without overworking the math teacher or overpopulating a class size. It's those kinds of decisions and views that we want to arm our leaders to be able to do as they enter the scheduling process. So it is within their means for sure, but it is also being able to shift the thinking to make sure that we are looking at, or they are being able to view their schedule from views other than what they've done year over year. I would just like to add really quickly that we did have Mr. Edmonds talk to a few of our leaders from various schools in size and in complexity, meaning multiple grade levels beyond just 9-12, and folks who have been doing scheduling for a while, and schools that try to be more creative with their schedules, just to give them an idea of the vast differences that we have across schools as we enter this work together, potentially enter this work together.
Thank you. Did Ms. Estrada Perez have a question?
Thank you so much for that information. I have two questions. It's very separate from one another. In terms of like the training and onboarding of like a new software that's going to be used, how does that, what is the planning that's going into the training, the onboarding to make sure folks can utilize this the software? And then the B question, and I'm happy to repeat them later because they're very different, is data safety. What is it? Who has access to the data? What does the data safety look like? Who is on the back end? Like who, aside from us, who have access to that data, knowing that there's some important information that some of our students' information will be there? Is it shareable externally? You know, like I'm really concerned about just in general our data, making sure that our data is safe as it pertains to a lot of our students and the national context and just everything that we're experiencing. So if you can speak a little bit to that, that would be really helpful as well.
Mr. Edmonds, did you want to share some about the data piece? We do have a data sharing agreement with Timely, but is there anything else that you want to share in terms of the question that Board Member Estrada Perez just asked? And then we'll get to the training and onboarding.
Yes, we have a data sharing agreement that we have put in place, and we'll look for signature from the district level. And we thoroughly protect any data that's shared throughout the life cycle of a partnership. And then there's features within that agreement that specifically name how we're going to house the data and what happens at the end of the partnership. So that is a huge part of our work to make sure that data is protected throughout the entire life cycle of the work that we do. And then to your first question about training, so each school that partners with us will have a dedicated school success manager that is solely dedicated to that specific school. And that person will be in charge of onboarding a scheduler into Timely. And so one of the better parts about Timely is we do see that onboarding can be really fast and folks can be up and running in our app a lot quicker than other products or supports that are out there. But each school will have a dedicated school support manager that will run that process.
Ms. Estrada Perez, did that answer your question?
It does. And actually, two follow-ups. So the school support manager, it's going to be from Timely. Is that right? For every school? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And then in terms of the data agreement, I know we have it. I know it exists. It will be helpful. I may have missed it. It will be helpful to see it, particularly around AI, and sort of like the back end of AI. That would be helpful for me to know. I know it exists. I know y'all are having your due diligence. I'm not, questioning that. I just also, as a board member, want to understand what not all of it entails, but like overall what it entails. That would be really helpful to know. So I appreciate all of your work on this.
Thank you. Ms. Fortune, you have another question?
Yes. Sorry, a bit more of what I asked the first time around. I think for me, this is currently still too vague. For instance, the last answer was people can get up and running really fast compared to other programs they could use. What is really fast? A week, a month? Like, I just need more specifics. And if we're going to optimize and maximize, any idea what the target is or any sense? Because, I'm looking at this. This is $181,000 for 6 months. I presume this is something we're going to need year over year if we start using it. And I'm not sure if this is the rate just for 6 months, meaning it will be double the amount if you want to have it all year round. I just need a bit more more specific information to be able to at least justify the expense in terms of what we believe we're going to get out of this.
I think we can definitely, provide more details. I can tell you from my lens on this in terms of the ROI piece. So in terms of the cost of the contract, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's a tool we would only really use in the spring, like the 6 months that happen during that time, because it's about building the schedule for the next year. And so it's a price per school essentially. And that's the equivalent of 2 FTE, that 181,000-ish. And even if that came from something like we've reduced, so essentially if we were to reduce 2 FTE across all 11 high schools in this process, just through pure efficiencies of actually, we thought we needed this many, we actually need 2 fewer. Anything more than that would represent a cost savings. And like I mentioned, some of this, and definitely Chris, feel free to jump in. Some of this can come from, we thought we needed this many FTE. Some of those were going to be vacant. As we know, we have that problem, especially in certain areas, although increasingly less. We actually don't need to even put those on the budget book because we found a way to build this schedule where we don't even need those 2 FTE. And actually the benefit of that, outside of the cost savings of that's reduced overall in terms of the budget footprint for next year, is that we're more likely that students are in front of a teacher as opposed to a substitute or a contracted service. So my lens, and we can definitely come with more details on other fronts, but my lens on this is that if across 11 high schools, it reduces more than 2 FTE that we needed, even if those were going to be vacant, it's still part of the budget book, then it's worth it from that perspective. And that's just on the cost side. It would then to me be, and the outcome we would be getting, even from kind of having the same exact set of resources overall, would be greatly increased if we are meeting more of the course requests for students and course requirements, as well as those needs of the special education and multilingual learner students. I can say from personal experience, I was really into scheduling when I was a consultant, so 2 jobs before this. And it's just a big logic puzzle, and it's really, really difficult to put together without this type of support, both of some type of tool that's basically creating an optimal scenario. So you're saying, here's all my criteria, here's what I need, and it's outputting, this optimizes all of those things for you. And so that's my take on the ROI. We would need to save 2 FTE or more across 11 high schools to justify the cost. And that's alongside the benefit of more students actually getting access to what they need. So that's at least how I'm thinking about it.
I'll just add in really briefly that we also don't ever want to kind of overlook the importance of building staff capacity, like building the skill set of staff, not only in the case of staff who are with us now, but then when we think about master schedulers, a number of times they happen to be another administrator in the building beyond the principal. So really spreading that staffing capacity across, because as we train up and ensure that the skill sets are being improved across our teams, then we don't have to rely as much on externals in order to support processes that we are engaging in. And so there was a question earlier as well about the training sessions. I had mentioned the kickoff for the annual scheduling training session. We'll also schedule and ensure that there are times that the staff engage both formally and informally with the team members from Timely, as well as district teams. And so there is a plan as well to ensure that we're having these training sessions ongoing, which will also be progress checkpoints. Just wanted to add that really quickly.
Are you all set, Ms. Fortune? Are you up next, Ms. Richard?
Gosh, I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I just had I didn't realize I was muted. May I follow up?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Just to clarify on the cost, I see a per student charge and a per school charge. So I think based on the price that I see, we are being charged per the school, and also based on what you said, what is the per student charge here then? So $32.11 per student
That
is,
was that was, I'm sorry for interrupting, Board Member Fortune.
oh no, that's fine. Please go ahead.
Okay. Yes, that was simply just simple math in terms of if we looked at it through the student lens and what that would cost per student. Just taking that 16.5 and dividing it by the total number of students, which is more than 5,000, that would be ultimately impacted from this work. So that's all that was. Just looking at the template from the contract form and just wanting to make sure that I followed the steps on that template. But essentially, it costs the 16.5 per school.
Okay. And then just another question about just the cost. So the 181 is that 6 months on the summary that we have. If we were doing this again next year, I understand it's not something we're actually using year round. We're only using it during a specified period of time. Is it also the 181, or is it double the amount? If we only need it for a specified period of time, I'm just curious to know how the pricing works moving forward, because my guess is we'll want to do this repeated contract, not just a one-off.
Mr. Edmonds, can you speak to subsequent contracting and what you've done in maybe other districts?
Yep. So we would work with schools. Usually, it depends on each school, but scheduling commences around January or February with course requests. And then we would work with schools all the way through getting final schedules re-uploaded into the SIS at the start of the school year. And then for future years or future support, it would be the same cost. However, it would be a little bit less because in the first year of any partnership, we do have a 10% one-time fee, and that's just for the data integration part. So that's setting up our data integration we need to get the data to design schedules. So that would not be the case for year 2 and any future years. So the cost would be less if we were to continue in future years.
As well, if there were fewer schools that were participating or needing the tool in future, that would impact the cost, obviously, as well.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense. And then my final question, I think it's more to the administrators on the call. I don't think I heard the answer to that. How do we survey students for what courses they might be interested in currently, so that we have that input to provide to them to try to optimize the placement?
Thank you. You are correct. I had that listed on my little note catcher and I did not answer that question. So thank you for bringing that up again. And we will, in the coming months, through Teaching and Learning Committee, share with the board and public the entire process. But essentially, each year, each school produces what's called a program of study, which is basically a list of all of the courses that are going to be offered in the upcoming year. And so the students sign up for their courses based on what's going to be offered in the upcoming year through the PowerSchool platform. And so the students sign up for all of their courses. Counselors go through, ensure that students are taking the accurate courses in order to move them along toward graduation trajectory. And then that's when that whole process begins. As Mr. Edmonds mentioned earlier, in some cases with some schools, typically there might be a copy of one schedule from one year to the next. What we want to do in this situation, which is what we started last year, starting with the student course request. That is the best way. And so we collect those at each school site with the student, but then also sharing those requests with the parent as well. That'll be just as essential.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Are we moving on to the financial piece? Ms. Richard?
Yep, I can transition us. So we will now transition to both our monthly update and just a quick summary of some of the work as we move towards the budget season for next year, as we're already in that process. The conversation we just had is an example of that, getting ready to move into the scheduling, staffing budget with school sites in the spring. And then we will do a deeper dive on some of that when we come back in January as well. So two kind of quick summaries here. One will be our monthly update, and then again, one will be a summary of some of the work we've been doing on developing the budget for next year. So on our monthly update, this is a summary slide that we have shared previously and just wanted to come back to it to ground us in the overall trends for this current fiscal year. There are no overall updates to our projected trajectory for this year. And so as a reminder, this is something that we're doing now on actually a bi-weekly basis of looking at how did what we budgeted compare to where we're actually going to end the year with some key factors here. So, and these are things we've talked about before. I just want to remind folks, part of it is the enrollment decline that we have experienced, which affects some of our revenue sources. We have higher staffing rates than previously, which again is really exciting. We're down on vacancies, but it also has a budget impact. And then we also talked through, we had additional student needs related to paraprofessionals, so needing to add some allocations in that area. So you can see there, the total of that is about $18 million right now that we are predicted to be over what we had anticipated. We also shared this in November. It's staying the same as of right now. I will say we will have a lot more information in January when it comes to other pieces of the budget. So things like tuition, transportation, which are other big categories. Right now, we just don't know enough about some of our non-salary expenses to be able to predict it. The reason we're able to predict salary is we can say, okay, if everyone who is here right now stays through the end of the year, how much money will we spend on that? So this really is just on the salary front right now. And then we will have more information in January with some of the trends on the non-salary front. So that's the overall summary of kind of what we predicted for this year, how it compares to what we actually are seeing. And I will make one comment just to tie this to the conversation we just had. Because we've seen that enrollment decline, that is something that will factor into the budget process for schools for next year. So when they have their enrollment projections, because our staffing formulas are based on number of students, schools may see reductions just based on enrollment. And so having the support to think through, okay, what does that mean for my staffing plan, for my schedule, is going to be a dynamic schools are facing, which has been a trend over time. As enrollment declines, staffing ratios then mean there's fewer staff members. So just wanted to name that's one of the implications of this is we're seeing a trend this year, and then that will impact some of the budget process for next year. I'm also sharing, so another way to look at some of this data, that's comparing what did we predict was going to happen when we made the budget and what is now happening. This view of it, which is some of the report that you get on a monthly basis, is showing how this year is looking compared to last year. And so in this view, what you can see is the main categories of our budget. And this was how we shared some of the information last year in the monthly updates as well. So it's the biggest categories and just showing how does our trend this year compare to last year. And some of it was in that monthly report that Ms. Santiago sends out. So you can see, we know we have a higher vacancy fill rate compared to last year, and we also had contractual salary increases. So you can see we're spending a bit more on salaries than we were last year. So that's in line with what we might have anticipated. And again, we're actually seeing even more spend in that area than what we had predicted originally in the budget, again, because we filled more positions. You can see slight variations in some of the other categories. Some of that is due to timing. And so, for example, system-wide purchase services includes things like tuition, transportation, and a lot of that is just timing of when we make payments for various things. And so at this point in the year, it's not necessarily reflective that that expense is going to be higher at the end of the year, but can be reflective of just the timing of when payments are made. So that's why we have both these views. We have what do we think will happen at the end of the year, and now we're looking at and how does that compare to last year. The one piece I will point out, just because it appears to be a difference and is driving some of the difference in overall spend this year to date compared to last year, is in sundry. And so as a reminder, that's our fringe benefit account. And that piece is really driven by timing. So there's a complex back-end process that goes into some of the benefit payments, especially for health insurance. And so that largely is a piece of timing. And that was something we talked about last year and some of the early months as well. It can be hard to tell what that means. And so right now, overall, we are expecting to spend more on benefits than last year, just due to having more roles filled and because healthcare costs go up every year. But the difference you see here, this is just for the first few months of the year, is more reflective of timing than that full increase we expect to see. So that's just comparing current year data to last year. I think the main takeaways for everyone to know is that we have more filled positions than we anticipated than last year. So we are seeing an increase on the salary and fringe area. And we also just have some timing differences of when payments are made. And so that's why we'll keep monitoring this month to month to see what the trend is over time. In terms of next steps related to this, as I've mentioned, we work closely with the city budget team to make sure that they are up to date on the trends that we are seeing so that they can take that into account as they're looking at the overall budget. I also mentioned we'll be monitoring those non-salary expenses. So in January, we will have a better sense of things like tuition and what we expect to see at the end of the year and transportation. We also will monitor just all the other discretionary non-salary expense categories. And we've done a more robust review process for any mid-year hires. And so given that we have filled so many more roles and we are down on enrollment than anticipated, we are just making sure that any mid-year hires make sense in our new context. So just kind of a review process there. And then, as I mentioned, all this impacts next year. And so as we start to have that conversation in the spring, we're going to be basing our predictions for next year on this year. So we can anticipate there will be declining enrollment. That will impact, based on staffing ratios, the total number of staff we need. We also will have a lower vacancy rate assumption, so we're likely going to assume we will fill most of our roles. And knowing that we're seeing this increased need around special education paraprofessionals, to include that on the front end. And so really, it helps to monitor the budget for this year so that we can make any adjustments we need to mid-year and make sure that we're updating folks. But it also is really helping us think about the process for next year. So before I turn to a summary of where we're at in the planning process for next year, any questions on the this year update?
Mr. Walker?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Hey, CFO Richards, I need probably just a little refresher as I've reviewed the budget. Our adjusted budget, the adjusted budget has some increases on a couple of areas. I just need refreshers to what that was. There were three areas. One is instruction improvements 322. There's a significant increase there for the adjusted budget. We obviously approved something. I can't quite remember what that is, so you can refresh me on that one. The same with communications. It's fairly significant. I just wanted to understand what that is. Is that salaries, a team? And what is communications versus advertising in this regard? And there's a third area, 899, other operational expenses. Yeah, like what exactly is that? That's all. So if you can just walk through that quickly.
Yeah, and I can definitely address the first one for sure, and the other two I might need to follow up on the details, especially the last one. The first one on instructional improvements, something that those are contracted services, particularly for special education. So the way in which it works, especially for special education contracted services, is we do the budget for the roles that are needed, so staff for special education. And when certain roles can't be filled, such as a speech language pathologist or a therapist, what happens is we move money from what was budgeted for salaries into contracts. And so that gets it's a movement. So it goes from salaries and goes to contracts so that we can then pay for those contracted services. And like we've talked about, we hope to reduce that as much as possible. Like we want to hire staff when we can, but there are times when those positions are vacant and there's a movement then to contracted services. Paraprofessionals would be the other area for that. So you see a big increase there. That's coming from some of the salary lines. And then I'm gonna get back to you on the communications front as well as the other category. The one other piece I'll say, because when you see a change to the adjusted budget, it's either movement from another area. So I want to look into communications to see that piece. The other thing is that we did have increases to revenue specifically for magnet-related grants that schools applied for. So there was some competitive grants for magnet schools, extracurricular, athletic, a few other areas. So that would represent an overall increase depending on what those schools are spending those dollars on. But I will get back. I want to make sure I'm accurate on the communications part and then the other piece you mentioned, the other category. So I'll get back to you on that. But the first one is definitely related to special education contracted services.
Thank you. So if I can follow up, Chair, for that one, what would be helpful then is to provide me/us with trend data, because part of what I'd like to understand is kind of year over year, what's that movement like? Like, have we made any improvement there, or every year are we still just, because that's what I get tagged with is, are you making any improvement in getting our special ed roles filled?
Yes.
And what you showed is that will be the way to begin to see that now that I understand, you get what I'm saying, how that movement is taking place.
Totally, because what we could show is what is the vacancy rate for special education related roles, and then how much are we spending on contracted services? And you would anticipate as we decrease the vacancy rate, we're decreasing the contracted services amount. So yes, that I can work on together.
And what I'm asking, right, is from like year 23, 24, 25.
Yes,
can we
over
see
time.
we've actually improved it over what it was, so we can say something good about that story.
Yes, that makes
and the other ones are fine. When you get it, then share it. That'll be great after the fact.
Okay.
Just email it to us.
Okay, will do.
Mr. Mills?
Yes, hello there. At the end of last year, the city said they were going to find $3 million worth of consolidated services. I know you said ongoing collaboration here. Is there any way you can talk a little bit more about how that process is coming along?
Yes, I can share my understanding. So I have collaborated with the CFO at the city and budget director there to look into doing a study that would analyze, are there opportunities for consolidated services between the BOE and the city? And as you mentioned, that was something the mayor announced last year that he would be looking into. And so the idea is to do actually right now a 3-year analysis, because we know it takes time to actually identify some of those areas. So we would look at a certain set of things in this budget process that would be implemented next year, and then 2 more years of understanding where there could be some consolidated services or efficiencies across a pretty wide swath of things. So things like some of our back end functions, but also just other services that both the city and the BOE engage in. And so my understanding is that we are working to get essentially an outside organization to do a feasibility study and say, hey, these are some of the areas you can look into, and then factor that into some of the budget process over the course of the next few years.
So are we getting that $3 million this year in consolidated
we are
services?
getting, this is my understanding, we are getting that $3 million from the city to support. Those were specifically the dental clinics, some of the community partnerships, Ready CT, CT Rise. We are getting that. And then it was the goal of the city to be able to save on the back end to make up for that. But that is essentially, those expenses are covered. Whether or not those savings are realized in this fiscal year is my understanding from the conversations that I've had. And then now the process is going to start for saying, basically, what's the feasibility of consolidating and where?
And if I may ask one more follow-up question, who's paying for said feasibility study?
The city.
Excellent. Thank you.
And we have been clear that we're not committing to any recommendations through that it's a feasibility study, and that is something that would need to be shared with staff and the board, because ultimately the board makes decisions related to that and would have to go through all the other processes we have related to the budget. So right now it's a feasibility study paid for by the city, and they're working on basically essentially getting a firm who would do that study.
Thanks.
Okay, not seeing any more questions. I will move to the update related to next year. So just a few more slides here, turning to our budget planning process for next year, which we've been alluding to this whole time. So this is just a reminder of our process. And really, we've been trying to hit all these areas of the data collection piece. So some of what we just talked about and understanding our current financial reality. We've also done a lot of work on this structural change piece. So I'll give an update on some of the community engagements that we've had. And then strategic resource use. That conversation we had on scheduling really fits in this category of how are we trying to make our use of resources as efficient as possible and aligned to the new strategic plan. And then the community engagement piece. So that's why we've been talking about this for a couple months now, leading up to what will kick off in January. And this is just a reminder of the overall timeline. So we've moved through some of these milestones, again, understanding current year trends. We did the review in November of some of our performance data from last year that can really ground a goal setting process for next year. We did the strategic plan overview last week, and all of this is kind of shaping the context for the budget process. And then, as I've said, January is really the time that we get more information. So we'll have what's our mid-year enrollment data and compare that to what we had from the fall. We'll have a sense of where tuition is landing, and that, as we've discussed, is a huge part of our budget, and we need to know what the trend is so we can predict for next year, as well as some of the ongoing negotiations, how those are shaping up. So in January, we're going to be able to say, okay, here's our updated deficit estimate. It's more precise. And start to do the kickoff work with schools and central office to start to think about the budget process. We also will do an overview then in January of here's how our staffing and budget formulas work when we allocate dollars to school sites. And so I think that will be both for you all and for school site staff, just in some ways a reminder, and if there's any updates to it, of really grounding in here are some of those formulas, here's how they work. So that schools in February will be ready to go with their staffing and budget allocations, and moving through that process over the course of this spring. Then, as of right now, we have the board, similar to last year, voting on the budget in April. The city council will be voting in May. And then the state legislative section, it actually is, that piece is in May. So that arrow down below that says state legislative session is between February and May this year. And a lot of that work is going to be happening in the Legislative Advocacy Task Force. And so I think we're just going to have to keep in mind, we're both going to be doing, similar to last year, the state advocacy work at the same time that we're working through what's in our locus of control related to allocating budgets out to school sites, to central office teams, and any efficiencies that we need to consider. So shaping up to be a big spring. That's why we've been doing the work this fall to just set the groundwork and level set on our fiscal outlook and some of these process pieces. So to give a quick summary of where we're at in terms of some of the community engagement, since the last time we talked, so since the November Board Finance Committee meeting, we've had meetings with central office staff, all of our school leaders, our union leadership, and we did a community budget forum last week, largely related to sharing overall information on our financial outlook. And the goal of that was the same presentation for everyone. And the goal of that was to really get ahead of it with some of our community and staff members. So instead of doing a session in March, when we're kind of in the thick of the process, to actually do the grounding ahead of time. So we talked about the structural deficit, we talked about our enrollment trends, and we talked about how we need to align the budget with the strategic plan, and shared some of the areas of focus, such as scheduling, that we want to kind of emphasize in the process. I'll say we got really good questions and input from folks. I know some of you were at the community forum, and folks were really, I at least felt, compared to some of the meetings last year, folks were really, really asking questions, because I think this really was just a building understanding conversation. And the main takeaway was just some of what we've talked about. We have a deficit largely driven by the special education tuition and door-to-door transportation for residents who don't attend our schools, inclusive of chef magnet schools, open choice, out-of-district placements. And so all of that, we're going to do a much deeper dive into, and that will be for January. So for the next board finance committee to really get into the details of that piece. It's a lot of data, so we're shaping all of that up, especially as we continue to have conversations with folks about it. But we do know we need to focus on the legislative advocacy piece through the task force, especially around that special education piece and the school choice piece. And like we've said, we really want to focus on increasing our in-house special education programming, knowing it's better to serve students at home. And then that can reduce some of that out-of-district piece. So this is just a summary of the conversations we've had. And like I said, we're going to be doing a deeper dive in January. So we'll share at the next board finance committee meeting some more detailed analysis kind of undergirding that, as well as, like I mentioned, talking through some of our how we staff and budget for school sites. So getting deeper into some of that information. I will pause there. So that's the overall update. That's just kind of process update where we're at. Like I said, we're going to be coming back with that deeper dive, but I will open it for any questions about anything I just shared.
Thank you for that. Ms. Estrada Perez.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I just have a quick question, and forgive me if you already said this. It's just a lot of information. I want to make sure I'm not missing it. When we're talking about low enrollment, we're talking about both because of the amount of students who are like just enrolling in Hartford Public Schools in general, but are we also including, so when we say low enrollment, we mean, is it the total number of students who go to our schools and not open choice, or are we talking about writ large all of our students that include open choice? Just for clarity for me.
Yep. So when we have been talking about enrollment decline, we are largely talking about students attending Hartford Public Schools. And so when we saw the drop of about 1,400 students this year compared to last year, that's just students who are attending Hartford Public Schools. So either our neighborhood schools or magnet schools. It's not then inclusive of the other places students could go. And what we've seen is that part of the decline that we have seen in the Hartford Public Schools is related to students making choices around open choice or magnet schools that are not run by Hartford Public Schools. So it relates to the students who are enrolled in Hartford Public Schools specifically.
So when we're talking about low enrollment, we're talking about the ones that go to Hartford Public Schools, not the ones that are choosing to go elsewhere, but we're still financially responsible for to make sure that got it.
Exactly. And that's where we've seen some increases in the number of students who are residents of Hartford who are choosing to enroll in those other options. And to your point, that we are financially responsible for in a variety of ways.
Got it. I just wanted to make sure what was population changes, what was the fact that the choice program, and what was like exactly when we mean total of students. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, and we actually went into on one of our presentations, we went and things were in different buckets. Mm-hmm. But in particular, we knew that due to the chef lawsuit, and they were saying, oh, this year they're going to open a certain amount of seats. And this year they're going to open around a certain number of seats. So we kind of knew it was coming because those open choice seats were increasing by over 1,000, right?
Yes.
So now this is the year that we just say, oh, it actually happened.
Exactly. And I think that was the November. Yeah, I just checked. The November Board Finance Committee meeting, if you're looking for the data, it's in that presentation.
Thank you. That was both very helpful.
But we will be revisiting all of that because we want to put everything together. Right now is a little bit of this, a little bit of that, because we are developing the data as we're moving along as it pertains to the finances and how it's connected to enrollment. But pretty soon we'll have like the full picture that all those pieces go together, and it'll make much more sense. Trust me. But thank you for that question, Board Member Estrada Perez. Very good question. Mr. Walker?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, yeah, CFO Richard, it's now December, post-October. You had what I'm saying, we had the 15,000 number at about that time. Typically, we get some increase of students that we take post-October. So has there been another kind of, I want to say, review of the numbers? So do we have some increase to talk about now over the numbers from like that September, October timeframe for students?
So we're going to do another grab of data at the beginning of semester 2, so in January, and that's what we did
Okay.
last year in the process. But I will say the trends over time historically are that so magnet schools tend to lose enrollment because they can't accept new students after October 1st. And so the only thing that can happen with magnet schools is decreased enrollment if students leave. Neighborhood schools, though, to your point, increase in enrollment over time. And so I'm really curious when we look at that data in January to see if we see that same trend we've seen in prior years, knowing that this year has felt different, right? It's been a bigger decline overall. And so that we will look at that in January to see, has that historical trend held in this context? And when we think about enrollment projections for next year, we'll take January into account when we do that to say what has been the trend since the start of the school year.
Okay. Thank you. And Chair, just if you allow me to reiterate, I guess, a request. For the next meeting, you were going to talk about the different financing buckets. There's a different cost if a student in Hartford Magnet goes to CREC or goes to Open Choice or something. To help us understand how I think it'd be helpful because it's definitely a little confusing. It'd be nice to have a scorecard so we can understand that cost impact.
100%. That's what's coming in January. And it's just,
Okay.
it's putting it all together, like Ms. Brody
Okay.
said. And so that's where we're headed with this for sure.
Do we have any other questions from members? None. Is that it? I'm sorry, I was not looking at an agenda this whole time.
No, yeah, that's it. We did the
wasn't paying
contract, the monthly update, and then the update on
Yeah.
next year's.
Okay, if no one else has any other questions, I did want to say hello. Our Commander-in-Chief, Dr. Townsend, did join us. So hello to you, but if no one has any questions, I don't know if you want to give greetings, Dr. Townsend.
Hello, everybody. I'm actually on the Parkway heading home from New Canaan. Unfortunately, the good Hartford Co-op team did lose. Great run, great season, a lot of morale building. So very excited about what it means for all of our schools, athletically speaking. So greetings, everyone, and great job, Caitlin.
Sad news, but at the same time, we're glad we got that far for sure. It's sort of the feel we used to have when we had 3 comprehensive high schools, and we were more contenders, but we're back contending. Nevertheless, so I'm just grateful that it also is an opportunity for our students to build a unity amongst our Hartford kids. So there's a lot of good that I think came out of this co-op team. So I'm happy for it. I don't see a hand up. So I thank everyone for your time. I appreciate the staff for your presentations and the data, and we're just going to look forward to keep on getting more information so we can all have a better understanding of where we are and where we're headed. So with that said,